is indeed my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Henrique Meirelles. Mr. Meirelles is now the chairman of JNF Holding, of JBS, and 5 other companies. He's also chairman of Lazard Americas, member of the Council of Lloyd's of London, and member of the board of directors of Azul Linhas Aéreas Brasileira. Henrique Meirelles has had a distinguished career in Brazil, in the United States. He is truly a global citizen, and he has done a tremendous service for Brazil, both at the Central Bank, where I had the privilege and the honor to serve under him, but more generally through his private foundations, various activities, and the engagement in public life. He writes a regular column in a major Brazilian newspaper, which I would highly recommend to all of you to read and follow. So Gilles will answer questions after his short presentation. If you want to have a question, you have cards within your folders, and if you could please write down your question, that would make it easier. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paulo. It's a pleasure to be here once more. It's a very important, interesting event. This morning, we covered already some 2 critical topics for Brazil today: productivity, innovation, and then an overall macroeconomic analysis of the critical points of the Brazilian economy today, on the monetary side, on the fiscal, quasi-fiscal, the question of the public banks, financial sector participation, and an overall assessment of the economy. I think that now it's about the moment when we go back to work during the balance of the day and the next days to look ahead. We are now entering a new period in Brazil. It's important to look ahead and see, okay, what should be done? What is necessarily the next steps? We talk about fiscal consolidation, we talk about all the basic reforms, but let's take a closer look on what should be done. And for that, as in every situation, I think that we should address the strengths, what is the strong points the country has to be based upon to build a recovery and a sustainable growth forward. And second, obviously, what the challenges are. And then, conclusion, a summary of that. Let's start with the strengths. What are the strong points of the Brazilian economy? The first point, which is very well known, but those of you who produce and operate or sell to consumer market in Brazil, is that the market grew substantially in this century. Brazil had about 80, a little bit less than that, million people in the consumer market. Consumer market considered here, according to the Brazilian classification, levels of income A, B, and C. Together, they would add to about 80 million Brazilians, and now we are talking about 150 million Brazilians. Obviously, the bulk of that was built during the first decade. But the fact is that today Brazil is already still the 8th largest market in the world by purchase parity comparison. In summary, it's a strong market which provides the scale for investment and innovation. That's an important point. a growing consumer market. Here, what I talked about, green, the levels of income A and B, C, middle class, Brazilian definition, and in E, the blue. What we can clearly see is that the blue one came from almost 100 million Brazilians to, that number is 2014 number, but it's basically today getting close to 40 million Brazilians. And the middle class, Brazilian definition again, is about 120 million. And interestingly, the green levels, which is basically A and B, also grew from 15 million to about 30 million Brazilians today. If we add all of that, we have a market that also offers opportunities for durables good consumption. We have here several items that I describe the level of participation in each income level for you to see here where the opportunities are and where the areas in which are already filled. It's very important and now clearer than before. When I talked about this point a few years ago, people looked somewhat skeptical. Now it's becoming clearer what I would call the institutional strength of the Brazilian economy. This is a World Bank measure of 2015, and they call it political stability. And Brazil is very well ranked here compared to other emerging market economies. And the first reaction is, with all this political turmoil in Brazil, how can that be? The question is, this is an objective analysis. This is not the political situation at the moment. What means? An independent and active judiciary. That is an institutional strength that is part of a political stability measure. Why? Because that is sustainable. That stays government after government. And Brazilian judiciary is proving to be independent. Regular and free elections. We can agree or disagree with like or not like a result of an election. Agree or disagree with what every candidate said or not during the campaign. But the fact is the elections are free. They take place at regular times. The elected ones take over. The city council, the mayors, the governors, the state representatives, the federal representative, the president, everyone takes over every 4 years, and the elections are free. The press is free and independent economically. That is very, very, very relevant. In summary, Brazil has a strong point if we look ahead. If we look for the next decade or more or beyond, we can see that that's a strong point for the country. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges. The first one, obviously, it was already discussed in the morning. I will not elaborate. We went to a very, very profound, detailed analysis of all of that, but I would only emphasize the fact that, yes, indeed, there was a decrease in the primary results and running into negative territory, and if that present trend is kept, the gross debt level would be reaching some worrisome levels a couple of years ahead. But again, that was already addressed. I don't like, or I don't need to add anything to what it was said in the morning. Now, the second point, this was already addressed as well in the previous speech, but basically education. Why? Because that, at the end of the day, means productivity. The average schooling, the number of years of the Brazilian system is increasing. The number of years that the average student stays at school and the number of students. The bad news is the quality, obviously, as we know. And here we have a comparison, the PISA score for 2012, the education quality between Brazil and all these other countries. You can clearly see countries which are going faster: Singapore, Hong Kong, China, Korea, Japan, all Asians. How the level of performance of the students' level of performance is better, definitely quantitative analysis. And then we get to the Northern European countries, etc., and Finland and Poland, and then Germany, and then France, and then Russia, etc. In summary, that is a point which has to be definitely addressed in Brazil if we want to move ahead. But I will not underestimate, and I think we should not underestimate, the achievement of what it was already done in terms of number of students at school, number of years. Again, granted, the quality, the performance at the end of the day is not a good one. But it's a specific and a very important challenge. Tax burden, obviously, it's critical. We talked a lot about the need to balance the budget this morning, which is correct, it's basic. We have to have a solvent state in the future in order for the economy to work and to have confidence in the economy. But in having said that, we are already at a very high level of a tax burden, which means that indeed we would need here to address the basic challenges, as Carlos mentioned this morning, as well in terms of constitutional constraints and directing expenses and all of that, and social security. Indeed, we will have to address the expense side of the equation because we are about already at the limit or maybe even over the limit in terms of productivity, the capacity of the country to finance that and to grow at the same time. Energy costs. Brazil also has a poor performance in terms of average energy cost for the corporation, for the people as well, consumers, but for the corporations to produce. And that is part of the Brazil cost. The trade, obviously, it's a closed country economy, we know that, and here it's a very interesting measure, objective independent measure. Again, several countries, including some emerging markets like Colombia, Venezuela, Indonesia, Peru, Russia, etc., China, India, and we see that Brazil, again, is more tightly closed, which means that that is a challenge. We have to open and we have to recognize the challenges to open, because the moment that we understand what we are doing, chances of winning, of succeeding is better. What do I mean by that? I am fully sympathetic with the business people, the business men and women who complain against any proposal of opening in the following sense. In general terms, everyone is in agreement, but if the government sets a group of rules which protect some sector and some business or some investor puts his or her money of his company there and invests based on that rule, and then it comes to me and says, okay, let's open it. It's like, come on. I did not create the rule, but now I will suffer the loss. I understand that. But the fact is that an economy which is closed is less efficient, less competitive, less productive, period. We have to address this question, And what I'm saying that has to be gradual, that has to take all of that into consideration, but must be done. That's the reality. Number of trade agreements, again, comparing with all these emerging market economies, Chile, Turkey, Russia, etc., Brazil and South Africa are the ones who have the lesser number of trade agreements. Again, it's a reflection of the same story. Logistics, here is basically transportation, energy, etc. Energy has a separate measure, but it's already here. In summary, logistics and energy are the two most important points. The logistics performance index are again based on a World Bank measure. Brazil again is not well positioned. And how viable, how easy is doing business in Brazil? The World Bank, the World Economic Forum measure or index of 2015, we can clearly see that again, Brazil is not well positioned, and we can clearly see again Singapore, always Singapore there at top of the table. In summary, those are, I would say, the most important challenges. But let's now address a very interesting issue, which shows that changes are more viable than they seem. Give you an example. Factors that affect business. World Economic Forum 2015, a questionnaire which was distributed for every company. What it was the worst problem? It was not tax burden, which was the fourth. It was tax regulation, the complexity of paying tax. And that you can solve by being rational, efficient in your tax regulatory system, even if we did not touch the overall level of taxation. We must address the overall level of taxation, but that's the problem. Why is not done? Well, because that needs political leadership and capacity to change. It's easier in theory, but if you go there, you get in the middle of the conflict of interest of municipalities, states, federal union, etc., etc., etc. Several different business disagreeing with each other, states fighting with municipalities. I know that because there was a project done addressing this issue more than once during the last years, 20 years, and always it faces the political problem. But it has to be addressed because it's something that's politically difficult to organize, but when it's done, it's very effective. Infrastructure, obviously, that again, something with the proper set of rules, investors, there is investment, there is money available, and there is the demand. That is what sometimes we forget. One of these days I was fly over the state of Mato Grosso and see one sad thing, worrisome. On the other hand, it's interesting because there is a positive side of it. That line of trucks over that poor roads. It's impressive because the roads are not good, yes, but because the goods are there being transported regardless. Expensive, trucks getting out of the road, but the fact is production is there, the demand is there, which means that if you make the investment, the return is there. It's only to allow the market to work. This is the kind of low-hanging fruit that I think can be achieved. It was mentioned something this morning as well. Labor regulation, that's again something which is more challenging politically, but it's there. It can be also make it more rational. Government bureaucracy, etc. And corruption, which is being addressed now by the judiciary system in Brazil. Low quality, again, education. In summary, we can clearly see that the most important issues can be addressed by a strong political leadership. And then we have in political instability. Yes, it's there, but still, again, it's not one of the most important ones, according to business perception. Then I have inflation, innovation, etc. Proposed reforms. Evidently, reforms should boost productivity. That was already mentioned. For that, they should reduce distortions to physical capital accumulation and human capital. In terms of physical capital, again, tax burden, summarizing tax burden, infrastructure investment, and human capital, education, training, and health of the labor force. And again, yes, but with fiscal constraint to keep the balanced budget. Some basic principles, only to make a very general statement that it's important because sometimes we forget those things in Brazil. The government's most important role is to enforce the property rights, the proper rules, but to allow the market to work. And regulate it when it's appropriate, very seriously, but basically to allow the market and the efficiency to prevail. Fiscal policy, social security, it has to be addressed. There is a general level of awareness in Brazil already about that, the minimum wage indexation, etc., gradual age constraints. Short-term tax increase might be needed to balance the budget, yes, but a gradual reduction of tax burden ahead is necessary, because if we say, okay, we will address the question of the tax burden in the future, but now what we are proposing is a tax increase. People say, well, come on, again. We are listening to this story for how many years? And it's necessary that a clear path ahead is defined, clarified. Then I think that can be done. Flexible and convertible exchange rate, separate, international reserve, and mentioning that because that's important. That we see lots of problems or worries the markets have about Brazil, but we don't hear. There is no concern about the availability of foreign exchange currency. In summary, the foreign exchange crisis is something of the past in Brazil. Evidently, the foreign exchange rate, the real depreciation is helping now to balance, and recession is helping to improve the balance of payments, indeed, but what provides is the level of confidence at the end of the day, the level of international reserve. That's critical, it's there. Those are two very important points that I mentioned. The dimension of the consumer market, the level of international reserves, those are something that Brazil built, and it's there to be preserved and to stay and to be built upon. Infrastructure investments to be taken by the private sector, etc. I am mentioning here only to give example that there is a long list of things that can be done, not only in education but in health as well, is to create a virtual system to complement the public school and the university, etc. In summary, we have to create a system in that private initiatives can become more efficient, more productive, because it's clear that the public system cannot provide the kind of education quality improvement that we need now alone, and then it's necessary. There's no money for that. Then it's necessary that we gather the private capital, but creating a system in which the government participates but demands the measurement of the quality. To monitor, to apply tests, and to improve the information regarding the quality of the schools. Something for health. Labor market, the regulated labor laws allow private settlements, training courses to facilitate worker reintegration and reduction of some of the benefits. International trade policy, again, I think that some unilateral trade tariff reduction, I think, is necessary, and a proactive trade agreement effort. In summary, those are the basic points. In terms of conclusion, to provide some numbers to you, evidently those are indicative. I would say no adjustment to 1.2. Sometimes when I show this, people say, why not 1.1 or 1.3 or whatever? Yes, that is a general guideline. What I'm saying is that the growth, if there is no adjustment, even if we balance, but there is no fiscal, strong, sustainable fiscal adjustment, which provides at the end of the day confidence increase on a sustainable basis, we will grow at a very low level, and we will keep the present potential growth rate, which was mentioned this morning, of about 1%, which is what we have today. In summary, we need to increase investment to increase the potential growth rate. What's basic, if there is an increase in the investment, if there is an increase in the confidence level, then we could move higher than 2%, and with all the reforms, not all, but most of the reforms that we talked about, I think that we could go back to 4% than that we grew in the last decade. It's very important if we take a look in the last decade, because indeed there was the improvement of the terms of trade, which was very important, particularly in the later part of the decade. But if we look at the trade, terms of trade, you see that until the beginning of 2007, it was around or below historical levels. And Brazil had already started to grow from the second half of 2003, 2004, 5, 6, meaning that what provided that, it was basically the increase in investment, the increase in the level of confidence as a result of the stabilization of the economy at that period. This is what we are talking about. If we have to continue that, it's everything we are talking about, which at the end of the day will improve productivity. I think that that's the summary of what I would like to say in terms of now. I think it's about the moment for all of us to think on a broader perspective. What has to be done has to be addressed in Brazil, rather than some very important, critical, but specific points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor Meirelles. We have 4 questions. The first one comes from Marcelo Parreira of Columbia University, and the question is, can the next government, if Rousseff's impeachment happens, pass the necessary reforms in a fragmented Congress with the workers' parties in opposition? And what are the most needed reforms at this point? An easy question.
No, I think that that's a very easy answer. I hope so. I think that that's the only way out. And I think that more and more and more, there is a general level of consciousness about that. I mean, that has to be done. I think that there is a very interesting thing that sometimes I mention that people get surprised. What's that? For years, and when we were there, Paulo, and I spent a little bit more than you. You came back to New York anyway. But the fact is that we've faced tremendous opposition, even from very important parts of the business community. And I always respected them, because this was discussed in the morning, and I thought that Monica gave a very interesting answer to that. I mean, all the participants of the panel today were brilliant. But when she said, well, if you provide the right incentives to business, they do the right thing. If you provide the wrong incentives, they do the wrong thing. It's clear, because the main job, the role of a manager of a business is to defend the interest of the shareholders in the company. I think that that's basic the rule. The government should do its part, judiciary should do its part, private should do its part, and the company has to survive, provide, make money, and create jobs and produce. I think that that's the basic part of the equation. And we face tremendous opposition. Why? Because people are complaining against interest rates and this and that too high, but eventually in due time, people began to realize that inflation was coming down, interest rate was coming down, etc. And one day it was very interesting. I was in a meeting with businessmen, and we had some neighbor country together with us, some government officials there with business persons from that country as well, and one very prominent Brazilian businessman who was a very good friend, he began to complain. He said, well, I have to agree that you've done something very important. That was 2009. Brazil was in a deep crisis last year. All the measures taken by the central bank were critical, very important. Congratulations, thank you for that. But we have still several points. We should decrease forcefully the interest rate. We should make intervention in provide intervention in the foreign exchange market, and this and this and that. I look at him. Said, considering what your company grew and your profits grew during the last years, my friend, I am sure that every day when we go to bed, you thank God, because we never did what you asked for during all these years. But what I am saying is that that kind of experiment was there. Very important group of economists, even business, willing to have a stronger government with an intervention policy, address of the economy, with all kind of measurement. What I would like, I like it to tell them that you are addressing, you are trying to fix the effects of the economic factors. You have to work on the factors, you have to work on the causes. In summary, but that was addressed, that was done, that was attempted, and I think there is a general level of awareness now that we have to control the size of the state, we have to control the level of the private debt as well, the public debt for sure, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of that, I think, is an achievement. And already there is a much stronger basis to discuss that than there was in the past.
Thank you. We have another question, which is a follow-up to that, and I'll kind of paraphrase the question a bit. It comes from Danielle Jevaux from Tross International. So the question here is, how do you rebuild a trust in public officials and in the public institutions that has been compromised and in part destroyed?
Well, evidently, there is it's a very difficult process that the country is going through now, because it's not only on the political scene, as we have been watching during the last days. Many of us watching it in actual time online, but also on the judiciary, on the corruption fighting, on all the legal battle about getting the public system to work with better and more ethical behavior and so on and so forth. Having said that, I think that it comes for the good, and people, they understand that. And at the end of the day, politicians are forced to understand because they depend on the voters at the end of the day. I think that it's changing that. If we look at the public demonstrations, etc., even on both sides, you can see clearly what the people now in Brazil are demanding: better public services, no corruption, etc., and more transparency, etc. And I think that change came to stay. And it's difficult to say when that is exactly is going to happen, what law is going to be approved when, etc., what's going to happen next month. No, this is not what we are here to talk about. But basically, I think the trend is there. I think it was mentioned this morning as well by Marcio, and I think, for instance, the fact that the president is in the process of impeachment because of fiscal questions. It was not corruption or serious or any kind of crime of that nature, but because of fiscal questions, not to be followed a specific fiscal point of the fiscal responsibility law. Yeah, evidently, government fighting back, saying no, that did not happen, but the fact that the subject of the process is fiscal, that's very important. And I think we should not oversee that. I think what's happening in Brazil is very important, with very important consequences for the future.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question is a kind of a difficult one for a former governor. And the question comes from Dan Victor from Sumi Trust. And the question is, how would you assess monetary policy in the period after you left the central bank, and what would be the responsibility of monetary policy in part for what has happened?
That's an easy one, Paulo. You allow me, I will tell you a story. That was in about 2011. I was part of a seminar in Madrid, and we had former central bankers on the podium, on the panel, and a question was asked to Paul Vaughan, who was there. And he asked Mr. Vaughan, etc., how do you assess the quantitative easing and the monetary policy in the U.S. today, etc. Paul, from his heart and with his voice, said, I don't comment on my successors. And I look at him, Paul, but you left already for how many years? He said, no, but that's a very important central bank practice. Then it's an easy one. I don't have 20 years that I left central bank, it's only 5, but I think it is still a moment not to be judging central bankers that took place after I left.
Yes, I thought that was going to be the answer, but anyway, I made the question. The final question comes from Marcelo Guimarães And the question is, what are the major factors for Brazilian firms to internationalize and to go to the market in a major way? And obviously, you're very well positioned to answer this.
Yeah. Well, I think that here, I don't think there is a need or there is any much that the Brazilian government can do for that. Evidently, that if there is proper funding in Brazil for Brazilian corporations to invest in Brazil or outside, that helps. That's important, obviously. If you have at the end of the day, funding is an important part for investing everywhere, in Brazil, outside Brazil, wherever. Having said that, at the end of the day, it comes to what I mentioned in the beginning of my speech. It's a scale. The moment that the country has a scale, that stronger, larger companies are built, you have more experience and competitive management, you are able to go outside and compete. And it's as simple as that. And we are witnessing now some Brazilian companies which are larger outside Brazil than in Brazil. There are a few already. And at the end of the day is to be able to go there, compete and win. And evidently, if you have the funding for that is important. If you are able to go to the market and to bank and to fund yourself, either in the capital markets or in the banking system, that's very important. But having said that, at the end of the day, you have to have scale on your home country. It happens that you have companies of very small countries which are global corporations. You have Swiss companies to do that. You have, obviously, that's traditional, but the fact is that that's not the rule. That's not the most common situation. Normally, countries which have some excellence in some parts and some very good technology and know-how, etc. But in general, if you are having scale in your home country, you are better positioned to go outside. Chinese companies are showing that today, and I think to some extent Brazilian companies as well. And the good news is that if you are given the right opportunity, Brazilians, either the workers, the management, etc., everyone is showing that has the capacity to compete. It's only a question, going back to what was said in the morning, do the right incentives, and I would add the right set of rules, the right set of environments and environmental as well, but also we can create a market which enables the companies to grow and then grow outside. Thank you.
Thank you very much.